everyone and welcome to another video. The year is 2017. It's the end of an era as both 12th Doctor Peter Capaldi and showrunner Stephen Moffat decide to move on to other things. Moffat's departure has been known since the previous year, with Chris Chibnall having already been announced as his successor. But things seemed a bit uncertain as to whether or not Capaldi would go with Moffat, as he doesn't make his decision public until late January. But yes, he does ultimately decide to leave at the end of the year, along with Moffat. Series 10 then serves as the final part of both Peter Capaldi's and Stephen Moffat's eras, as the Doctor and showrunner respectively. There's a slight soft reboot style to it, with the series harkening back to previous companion introductions when it introduces brand new companion Bill Potts, played by Pearl Mackie. The series is made up of a whole variety of episodes, from sentient puddles and emoji-speaking robots to the dark evils of space capitalism and alien propaganda rewriting history. There's a fair share of old enemies returning as well, from Daleks and briefly Movellans to the Ice Warriors and the Cybermen. There's even the return of not just one but two incarnations of the Master in the action-packed and emotional series finale. But the Master wasn't the only Gallifreyan villain that was supposed to make their return in this series. Originally, the meddling monk from the William Hartnell era was also set to come back, in a truly bonkers story by Peter Harness. Harness had submitted the story idea, called How the Monk Had Got His Habit, shortly after he'd finished work on the previous series' Zygon two-parter, the Zygon Invasion / the Zygon Inversion. He'd even started speculating on who to cast for the monk, with him thinking that actor and comedian Matt Berry would have been perfect for the part. However, for one reason or another, this story unfortunately never came to pass, and so it joins the countless amounts of unmade stories the Doctor Who has had over the years. But all of this begs a question. What if things had gone differently? What if, in an alternate timeline, that hadn't have been the end for this storyline? What if How the Monk Got His Habit had been made? Now, I should start this off by admitting that I actually got some details for this unmade story wrong. Originally, I had thought that it had been intended to be part of Series 9, which is why when I asked my friend Billy Bob to design the thumbnail for this video, I asked for Clara to be included. I had then shared this version thinking that I'd got everything right, but when I was searching for more information on it for this video script, I realised that I had in fact got things wrong. It would have most likely been part of Series 10 if it had indeed been made. I had got confused due to reading about how Peter Harness had submitted the idea after he'd finished work on the Zygon Invasion / the Zygon Inversion, and for some bizarre reason I took that to mean that it would have been a Series 9 story. So yeah, I do have to apologise for all of that. It really wasn't my intention to mislead or confuse anyone. I just made an honest mistake, and didn't realise until I had shared the thumbnail publicly. But as you can see, it's all fixed now, and I will stick with the idea that the story was meant for Series 10 for the rest of this video. Anyway, now I know that not all of you will necessarily know the plot details for how the monk got his habit. So let me explain what it would have all been about. The whole episode would have essentially served as a sort of origin story for the monk. We would meet him at a very early point in his personal timeline, earlier than his previous TV appearances in both The Time Meddler and The Daleks' Master Plan. We would start things off with a cold open where we see the monk in his TARDIS. He's listening to some disco records. The song Rasputin by Boney M comes along and inspires the monk to go back in time and get the real Rasputin to listen to the song. He then does precisely that, causing Rasputin to completely lose his sanity. This changes history, preventing the Russian Revolution from ever happening, and completely messing up the whole trajectory of human history. The monk is horrified at the mess he's made, and phones the Doctor up saying, "I've made a terrible mistake." The opening titles would then play, and we would then get back to the rest of the episode. It turns out that the monk has contacted the wrong Doctor. He meant to ring his contemporary, the First Doctor, but he ends up meeting the 12th Doctor instead. The 12th Doctor, Monk, and the Doctor's companion, presumably would have been Bill if it had been made as part of Series 10, then set out to try and fix the whole mess. But they realise that it's impossible to return the real Rasputin to normal. The monk is eventually forced to regenerate into Rasputin's form, and then act out the rest of Rasputin's correct timeline, so that history can take its proper course. The Doctor then departs, knowing that the monk's new Mad Monk role will rub off on him, and cause him to become the villain that he would later fight against. So yeah, I really wasn't joking when I called the story bonkers earlier on, but I mean that in a good way. The more and more I hear about this storyline, the more I think of how utterly robbed we were that it never got made. I think it would have made for an incredibly funny and crazy story, and I could imagine that if Harness got his wish to have Matt Berry play the monk, that would have been dialed up even further, and we would have something almost like a modern City of Death in some ways. So I wouldn't have it changed in any way for this what if scenario. Since I'm not too sure why it's never got made, I don't really know what would have to change so that it could be produced for this alternate timeline. We'll just imagine that Stephen Moffat really liked the idea or something. But if it had been part of Series 10, then where exactly could it fit into that series? Well, it could either go towards the beginning or the end. If it were to go at the beginning of the series, then perhaps it could take the place of Knock Knock. Not that I'm saying I don't like that episode, but it might be good to have something a lot more serious, like Thin Ice, be succeeded by something much more light-hearted, like How the Monk Got His Habit. Or it could go after Oxygen instead, and one of the Monk Trilogy episodes gets taken out to accommodate it. And again, it could serve as a much needed, lighter story after the deep political satire of Oxygen, and before that kind of continues with the Monk Trilogy episodes. Alternatively, if it were to go towards the end of the series, perhaps it could replace the Eaters of Light and be slotted into air after Empress of Mars. So then it would be almost like the last normal kind of run-of-the-mill adventure for 12 Bill and Nardole, before things come to a heartbreaking end with World Enough in Time / The Doctor Falls. And since it would air after Missy helps to rescue the Doctor and Bill in Empress of Mars, she could also factor into it in a small way, perhaps having a slight witty tete-a-tete moment with the monk, and her apparent redemption could be continued in a small way in how the monk got his habit as well, perhaps. I completely agree with Peter Harness that Matt Berry would have been a great pick to play the monk, and according to a quick look at his filmography on Wikipedia, he might very well have been available to film the episode in 2016, since Series 10 was filmed about a year before it actually aired, and he is a Doctor Who fan himself, having created his own take on the original version of the theme for one of his music albums back in 2018. If he hadn't have been available for whatever reason though, then perhaps Rufus Hound could have been a good replacement. He has played the monk for Big Finish after all, although if he were to have appeared in this story, his place in the monk's personal timeline might have needed to have been rewritten a bit in the audios he would go on to appear in after 2017. If How the Monk Got His Habit had been made, then it would have a knock-on effect on the power of the Doctor. After all, that would also see a Time Lord's enemy of the Doctor's pretend to be Rasputin, and would even still feature Boney M's Rasputin song in a memorable moment where Sacha Darwin's master dances to it. We could just have that bit of the episode removed, as it wasn't fully explained why the Master chose to disguise himself as Rasputin in particular anyway, even though I did find that dancing scene really funny. Or it could be that the Master embarks on a similar scheme at some other point in Earth's history, and disguises as another historical figure instead. Perhaps he pretends to be Napoleon Bonaparte and dances to ABBA's Waterloo instead. But beyond all of that, I don't think there's too much else to say really. I would have loved to have seen How the Monk Got His Habit get made, and even though most of Series 10 was fairly dark and serious in terms of its themes and ideas, it might have been nice to get a much needed breath of fresh air with a much lighter and funnier episode. There are quite a few places where How the Monk Got His Habit could have slotted into the series, so please tell me below which spot you think it would have best fitted, and which story it would have had to replace. How the Monk Got His Habit might sound like a pretty fan service heavy episode, but it's worth remembering that the show did quite a lot of that during the Capaldi era, from having a Series 9 opener based entirely around one line from Genesis of the Daleks, and full of old Dalek designs to make up for the lack of them in Series 7's Asylum of the Daleks, to a massive, earth-shattering Series 10 finale, featuring the original Mondasian Cybermen, as well as a few other cyber designs, which also served as the first and currently only multi-master TV story. Hell, we even had David Bradley as the first Doctor in the very next episode after that. So having a character like the Meddling Monk return would be very in keeping with the way the show was at the time. I should mention that How the Monk Got His Habit isn't the only storyline that saw a returning villain that Peter Harness submitted for consideration. He also thought up a return for the Mara, last seen during Peter Davison's era. This was an idea he came up with after finishing work on Series 8's Kill the Moon, although I don't think there's all that many details for this idea, as opposed to how many there are for How the Monk Got His Habit. Another thing to note is that Peter Harness would later release a short story acting as the opening of a supposedly abandoned novelisation of How the Monk got his habit. This was for the Doctor Who Lockdown tweet-along for the Zygon Invasion / the Zygon Inversion on Twitter. I tried to have a look at it, but the link for it that was on the TARDIS wiki page wouldn't work for me for some reason. But anyway, so there's my take on what if How the Monk Got His Habit had been made. But what did you think? Did you agree with my take on it or not? And would you have done anything differently? Please let me know in the comments section below. Anyway, so thanks for watching, I hope you liked it. Please don't forget to press that subscribe button below, as well as press the bell icon at the side of it, so that you'll stay notified of when all my new videos come out. This channel currently has 2,293 subscribers as of time of writing and recording this video, but if we can get to 2,500 by the end of this year, then I will do a Q&A, where you can ask me whatever questions you want. Just keep them polite, please. Also, please rate and comment below your thoughts on all of this. And please feel free to donate to my Ko-fi page, link in the description, or send me a YouTube super thanks below, if you want to, of course. And I shall see you all in another video. So, until next time, bye bye!